Heresy launches in a few days and there's lots of open questions, lores and secrets still out there to be revealed before heading straight into the Dreadnaught. In this video I'll give everything you need to know about Oryx returning, the potential plotline of the dungeon, how Ahsa is in danger, the dying Dreadnaught infused with the power of an echo, and how Xivu and Savathûn fare for the final episode of the Light and Dark saga. The recent dev livestream revealed a little story of the new episode, and it included the return, in some fashion, of Oryx, the once taken king. But the biggest question that hangs over us is, how is this possible? Here's what we know. In the Ghost of the Deep dungeon, we interrupted a hive ritual where we found a wizard of the Lucent Brood trying to resurrect Oryx from the dead. Obviously, this didn't happen, but we did learn that Oryx was still receiving tides from the hive, but we never found out where they were going, so there was power building up, going somewhere. What was strange also was that Oryx's body was changing and large concentrations of taken energy were found in his cells. And darkness was still active but without direction and willpower, still capable of inducing hallucinations to those who came near it. His body could absorb knowledge and memories. Also, the body was slowly growing and changing even without a mind. Despite all this, Ikora went and took the body and hid it away, just like how she handled Savathûn's body. Also, the worm inside Oryx, feeding from unending violence, has apparently gone. And we also do not know what that's got up to. This line comes from a twid where Bungie mentions many hives still tied to Oryx in secret, though it is not known where the power of their tides goes, given that the Taken King is dead. This is funny, as Oryx would really have looked at this necromancy attempt as complete heresy, as it corrupts the purity of tithing through the process of sword logic. In the high philosophy, only the strongest should survive, and being utterly killed in this fashion, as he was, should have a finality to it. Sundered Doctrine, the dungeon, coming up, releases just after Heresy Act 1, and information is scarce on the ground of what the focus of the dungeon is. What we know is that it's based in Rulk's pyramid, and it will be dread and taken enemies we face. But also, if you are looking at the developer preview of the Triumph seal for that dungeon, you will see the pin has the image of a 3-tier worm inside a shape that looks very similar to Rulk's upended weapon, still housed inside the pyramid. At the end of the Vow of the Disciple raid, we kill Rulk, and we also see the upended towering over a smoking mother of worms named Zeta, the nurturing worm. The upended is a Lubraean power converter that originally was used to take energy from one source and turn it into something else. Rulk was using it to take power from the worm mother and convert it into a weapon to break planets and essentially whatever he wanted. It seems as though Zeta, the nurturing worm, is dead, or comatose, from the dialogue of Savathûn's worm. Worm mother, though you sleep eternal, your role in Grand Symphony persists. Legacy will be carried best I can. Although what death means to a worm god or hive is very different to what it means to everyone else. So it seems the dungeon will be set around the worms and the upended weapon, maybe finding a different power source for the upended, like a Leviathan from Titan maybe, who knows. The Dread have been chasing the echo that fell to the Dreadnaught, and this could also impact the story, since here we know that the Dread and Taken are our main enemies here. Maybe Ahsa was taken by Xivu and is now set to power the upended, to enable Xivu a great weapon in her arsenal, to take the place of a now dead Witness. At the end of Season of the Witch, Eris exiles Xivu Arath from her throne world, leaving the Hive god of war very mortal. Since, if she cannot return to her throne world after being killed, she will face her final death. So, she is up against a wall. In the quest to find the lost ghost for Micah 10, during the final shape, we learn what Xivu was up to during the events of the final shape. She refused to help the witness, and while we were saving the universe, she began moving her forces through the ascendant plane in the Dreaming City. We now think she's preparing for a new war because after defeating the witness, we are weakened, and there is a power vacuum where she could step in and dominate. Also, during a mission to find lost ghosts, we discover that Xivu Arath's forces are also present on Mars and studying time rifts. Micah claims that she is looking for Warmind technology, but Mara then adds that due to the final shape effect, those rifts have become very unstable, and there is no Warmind. When Season of the Hunt was happening, Osiris decided that it was a good time to fly to the Dreadnaught and assess the threat level of this sentient, mobile throne world host ship. Osiris impales a wizard's head upon a stunted spike, surrounded by a freshly bloodied Hive sigil. The Dreadnaught console sputters to life, accepting his tithe. While Cade's old transmat zone is no longer in operation, the massive breach left by the Dantalian Exodus 7's impact remains agape. Entry had not been difficult despite the halls crawling with newly spawned thrall. They were young, and nearly a century of navigation through the infinite forest had honed Osiris' ability to remain unseen. The Dreadnaught systems present as living memory, chronicles and hymns recounting histories. It is a rat king of fading ideas, racked with failing connections and dying interpretations, as Ahsa suffers a slow, final death, damaged beyond repair. But there is knowledge to glean here. Osiris directs Sagira to rip spokes of data from the console for Vanguard High Command. Ahsa was Oryx's worm mentor, who was killed to attain the power to take. Oryx decided that it was a good idea to take the corpse of the worm and stretch it and sew it over his new ship's hull, and then steal hammers from his sister Xivu and scalpels from Savathun and beat them into plates to cover the corpse, covering his Dreadnaught, thus making the hull near impenetrable to all attacks, physical and paracausal. In episode Heresy, we have found out that the Echo has made its way to the Dreadnaught and interacted with the dying worm carcass, changing the nature of the ship, peeling back the skin of the hull, and blending what looks like egregore and traveller root-like tendrils that we see aboard the pyramid ship we board for the Route of Nightmares. This peeled skin aesthetic is also applied to the seasonal weapons, or what is termed the heretical weapons of episode Heresy. Eris being our guide for this episode will bring her back together with her Hive sisters to resolve a promise left after the actions of Season of the Witch, where Eris banished Xivu from her throne world and made her mortal. In the lore page of Ill Omen, Eris takes out a deck of whispers, which she uses again to find out what awaits us, for what I imagine will be fleshed out in Heresy. The deck reveals the Harbinger. So, she still had a role to play in all this. She stared down at the image of herself, running an ungloved fingertip along its edge. They would come for her soon. For a fleeting moment, Eris remembered the shape of her own claws, the power of the Hive in her grip, and best of all, the terror, the fear, the heartbreak, as Xivu Arath was removed from her throne. The feeling evaporated. The card faces stared up at her. The three of them united once again: Eris Morn, Savathun, and Xivu Arath. The cards spoke of confrontation, but also sorority. Xivu Arath had called her sister. Was she still? One final card. Lament. The visage of Oryx, his Dreadnaught, his logic, and his laws. That phantom with a shadow so long it lingered over them, long after his death. She tensed for a moment, her eyes lingering over the card face, before picking up each one and returning them to her deck. If you didn't think all the previous info was enough, when the Grimoire Anthology Penumbra dropped, we got a lot more new details about Ahsa, Savathûn, and Xivu Arath. We found the actual winnower speaking, warning Ahsa of coming danger. Ahsa is apparently looking for the place where it all began. You know you'll keep your promise to find the place where this all began. Potentially, this could be the opening event of the season where we are promised something significant and dramatic happens to kickstart this episode. A little backstory was given for Savathûn and Ahsa, who have had some connection previously, and that Savathûn has a proposition for Ahsa. Go on, Ahsa. Someone's coming to see you, and I'm sure she's got a real humdinger of a proposal for you to hear. Bungie had also confirmed this through an interview during the Season of the Deep, when they were talking about the collapse and what role Ahsa had. It's not explicitly stated, but Robert suggests Savathûn and Ahsa may have had an interaction. This is likely why Ahsa understands that Savathûn needs to come back in order for us to get to where we need to go. Robert capped off this thought by noting that Oryx's body is below the oceans of Titan and that Savathûn has plans within plans, and asks, what use would she have for a navigator? The biggest omen that Ahsa's future looks dim comes from a threat by the Hive God of War. Xivu Arath wants to make Ahsa her own and make a pact with her, but to what end? We don't know. But this could be explained in the dungeon, I'd imagine. A big quote from Penumbra is, her sister though, it'll really wind her up if you die by any other hand but hers. She means to take you for her worm, and she pretty much runs this town, truth be told. In the end, I think the final episode will explore what does heresy actually mean to the Hive. In the past, we've learned that heresy means anything that corrupts sword logic, the channeling of tides of power through the chains of command of Hive, eventually leading to one of the gods of the Hive, Nokris, son of Oryx, who would learn and practice magics of the death and would become known as a necromancer, was expunged from all histories of familiar place by Oryx himself once he learned of Nokris's corruption of sword logic. Xivu herself deemed that Savathûn's resurrection as a light-bearer was heresy to the Hive and sword logic. We clearly heard her say this in Ghosts of the Deep. But what it could mean is the upheaval of everything the Hive believe in now, that the witness is gone, and the corruption of darkness that can start to be diffused, where both light and dark can be seen as elemental forces to work in harmony together, rather than fighting theologies that must be proven right through any means necessary. Bungie has told us that our guides through heresy will be Eris, Drifter, and Sloane, who are all directly implicated by the events that unfold during this episode, and with all the portents and implications of something happening to Ahsa, bringing Sloane into the frame, and the Hive Sisters dealing with a returned Oryx of some shape, we will have our hands full.
Wow, this has just been such a pleasure. I'm such a lucky boy. I can't wait to go home and